This is Gemara in Kesubos, Daf Yomi, and once again we like to dedicate today's shir as a schos neshama of שלma Mנחam, whose yahrzeit was yesterday. Mirat Hashem, the learning of the entire Chabura should bring Saralei שלma Mנחam to a higher place in Gan Eden Shel Maila. We pick it up from the second wide line of Mem Zayin and Beis. Excuse me, Amar Rava. Says Rava, Hi Tana Savar Mizaynais Midaraisa. Says Rava, the Tana of the Brisa they're about to quote holds that Mizaynais, for the husband to support his wife, is a din midaraisa. Explains the Gemara of what? Where do we know this? Explains the Gemara the Tanya, as we learned in a Brisa. She'ira, the Torah says. Excuse me, this is just not working. Here we go. The Torah says She'ira. Says the pasuk She'ira, what does that refer to? Elu mizaynais. That refers to supporting one's wife. Ksusa. And the Chenu Omer, and simply the pasuk says Vashar Achla She'er Ami. And that's where the pasuk refers to as She'ira, as support for one's wife, as refers to mizaynais. Ksusa. What does Ksusa refer to? As everyone is thinking right now, that what does Ksusa refer to? First to the ksos, first to the clothing. Kemashmaya, as it sounds. Aynasa, what does the word ayna the pasuk refer to? Zu ayna ha'amura ba'teira, that's referring to the ayna, that's referring to the conjugal relations, the obligation of a husband to be together with his wife. V'cheinu aymer, as we see in the pasuk, imta'ana as benaisai, as the pasuk uses the word of ayna in reference to relations between husband and wife, and here actually refers to between as zinos. So opinion number one is holding that mizaynes is a daraisa. We're learning it out for the word she'ira. Continues the Gemara. Rav Elazar Omer, she'ira does not refer to mizaynes. Rather, she'ira zu ayna. What does she'ira refer to? Says Rav Elazar. That refers to husband being together with the wife, sleeping together. V'cheinu Omer, ish shekol she'er b'sarai. A different pasuk. And here the pasuk holds ish share basara, they have to be together. Lo sikru v'ligale zerba. Ksusa, what does that refer to according to Rav Elazar? Kimashmai, clothing. Aynasa elu mezaynes. So according to the first opinion, she'ira is mezaynes. According to the second opinion, Aynasa is mezaynes. Chenu oimer v'yancha v'arivecha. As the pasuk says, v'yancha. Excuse me, v'arivecha. So those are the two opinions as we see clearly, that they are holding that this obligation of supporting is a din daraisa. And finally, a third opinion of Lazbin Yaakov Aimer, the top line of Memchesam and Aleph, She'ira Ksusa. The pasuk puts together She'er with Ksus to teach us Lafum She'ira Tein Ksusa. According to the She'er, according to her bodily state, as we'll see in a moment, you should give her clothing. What does that mean? Should give her the type of clothing that is befitting for her. If she's a young girl, give her young style clothing. If she's an older woman, you give her clothing befitting that, and vice versa. Ksusa v'aynasa. And similarly, we equate the ksos, the clothing, to the ayna. That while from aynasa tein ksusa, that according to the season, ayna means season, you give the clothing. You don't give new clothing in the summer, rather new clothing. New clothing is thicker, new clothing is warmer. So new clothing is given in the winter to keep her warm, whereas chakim, the worn out clothing, that is given in the summer, in which you do not need the actual layer. So three different opinions, but all learning that the obligation of mizaynais is a din daraisa. Continuing the Gemara, 7 lines down on Memchesam and Aleph, continuing discussing this pasuk. Tani Rav Yosef, She'ira zu kiruv basik. Says the Gemara, what does Rav Yosef hold? That She'ira refers to the intimacy of the body. Shlining ba minig parsiim. What does that mean? That one should not be like the Persians. That one should not be together with his wife fully dressed. They should be together in the most intimate of manners, which is without clothing. If someone says, I can't be together with my wife, only I with my clothing and she with her clothing, the Torah emphasizes the fact of the need for intimacy between husband and wife, so much so that if a husband or wife claims they cannot be together unless they're wearing clothing, the halacha is they should get divorced and he has to pay her ksuba. Continues the Gemara, the two dots of Yuda Aimer Afilu Ani Shabi Yisrael. even in Ani Israel, and this is going on the din of the type of levaya that is necessary for one's wife, that the Mishnah said it cannot be no less than 2 flutes, and a woman that says Lamentations, a woman that says the Hesped. Mechlal explains the Gemara, that's Rav Yehuda holds. So Mechlal, what we can infer? The Tanakama Savar Hanulai. Sounds like Rav Yehuda is teaching us you need these 2 women playing the flutes. Sounds like the Tanakama disagrees. Says the Gemara, Eichi Dami. What is the practicalities of the story? Ida Orcha, if it's normal, woman playing, 2 people playing flutes at the levayos, at the funerals. My Tanakama. What's the reason of the Tanakama Damar Lai that says it's not necessary? And if it's not common to have these 2 people, my time to Rav Yehuda. What's the reason Rav Yehuda that says you should have them? Again, whichever way you cut the pie, it doesn't make sense. So says the Gemara, that is the differences of where his we'll call it's not a minhag, but his custom is and her custom. He generally has these type of things. He's accustomed to where he comes from has more elaborate funerals, where she does not. So Tanakama Savar, when do we say that a wife is brought up to her husband, that if her husband's on a higher stature, the wife is accorded the same level of honor that the husband gets? That's when Hani Mili Mechai says the Tanakama, that's only in the life. But once the woman dies, Tanakama holds she no longer gets that level of kavod. Rav Yehuda Savar, Afilu Lachar Misa, says Rav Yehuda, even Lachar Misa, she receives the same level of honor. Amar Rav Chisda, so continues the Gemara, says Rav Chisda, name of Amar Marokva Halacha, Ki Rav Yehuda, what is the halacha? The halacha is indeed like Rav Yehuda being the opinion of that even Lachar Misa, she's entitled to get that which her husband would have the higher level funeral. Continuing the Gemara, discussing the husband's obligation towards his wife. Ve'amar Rav Chisda Amar Marokva. It says Rav Chisda about 20 lines down. The first word of the line is Ve'amar. It says Rav Chisda name of Marokva. Mi shenishtata, a person that goes insane, a husband that loses his mind. Bezdin Yarden L'chastiv Izanim of harness in his ishtay. Bezdin goes down to his estate and uses the money of his estate to support his wife. Ubanav ubenaisav v'davar acher. And he used the money for his estate, for his sons, for his daughters, and for something else, which we'll see what it means in a minute. Amali Ravina Ravashi says Ravina to Ravashi. Why is it any different than what you learned in the Brisa? Someone who goes overseas, and while the husband is out, the wife goes to Bezdin and says, I need food. What does the Bezdin do? Says the Brisa, Bezdin Bezdin goes down to the estate, and Bezdin gives the woman money. And this Brisa says that if the husband goes overseas and the wife says, I need food, they give him food, but they do not children, nor davar acher, nor for this other thing. So I asked the Gemara, why, when the husband goes insane, do we yes give the sons and daughters? But why, when the husband's overseas, do we not? Explains the Gemara, Amar lei, Amar lei, excuse me. So Ravashi responds to Ravina, says Ravashi, there's a very simple difference between one who goes overseas and one not. So we assume he commanded and he left everything in order for his extended family. His wife is coming and says she has no food. Okay, so we give her, but the children, we assume he supported them. But he wasn't. You don't plan on losing your mind. So in that case, we have to support everything. So now says the Gemara, my davar acher, what's this davar acher that the Mishnah was, that the Brisa was discussing? Rav Chisda Amar Zetarsha, this means they give the wife adornments, jewelry, perfume, etc. Rav Yosef Amar Tzedakah, they give her charity. Man Amar Tarsha goes against Tzedakah, Man Amar Tzedakah, but Tarsha Avinu La, the tinvol, that it's not befitting to him for his wife to become disgusting, so that Man Amar would agree that yes, you should give her Tarsha, yes, you should give her perfume and jewelry, etc. Amar Rav Chia Baravin Amar Rav Huna Another halacha concerning when the husband is not around, 12 lines from the bottom. Someone goes overseas and unfortunately his wife dies. Bezdin goes into his estate. He's not there, but his wife needs to be buried. So Bezdin goes into his estate and buries her according to his honor, according to the level of wealth that he has, is that which Bezdin uses to bury her. Says the Gemara, Lefi kvaydai, v'loi kavi kvayda. Only according to his honor and not her honor. V'loi lefi kvayda. What if she was an stately, wealthy woman? She doesn't get a nicer burial. Explains the Gemara, meaning even if he is wealthier. It's teaching us that a wife goes to get up to her husband's stature and she does not go down to stature, as we saw earlier. And even after death, even after the husband is no longer, even if she is no longer, she still is befitting to get the additions of wealth that which her husband had. Amar Rav Nasna, and we conclude to this part of today's shir before the Mishnah. Says Rav Nasna, let's say someone is on his deathbed and he says, my wife dies, don't bury her from my property. Shaimim Lai, we listen to him. If he says, I don't want to pay for a burial, we listen to him. Says the Gemara, 1 second, why is it any different if someone says, what's the reason? My shana ki amar. What is it that he said that his estate does not have to be used to bury his wife? You know why? Because he wants the estate to go to the Yisayim and not to bury his wife. So says the Gemara, Kilamar Nami Nechsei Kami Yasmi Ramu. Says the Gemara, I don't understand. Even if he said no, with his death, his properties go to the Yisayim, go to his children. So what's the difference whether he said it or not? Explains the Gemara, whether it's referring to that someone who says in Mesu, if someone dies, referring to himself euphemistically, he's saying, if I die, don't use my own property to bury me. Then ain't shaimim lai. Why? If one cannot say, I don't want my own estate to be used to bury me, I want the public to bury me, and rather I want my children to have more money. Of course, that's not a appropriate way to act. And rather, says the Gemara, one cannot make such a stipulation, and rather he uses his estate to bury him. Continues the Mishnah on the bottom of Memchesam and Aleph, discussing at what point a girl is within her father's obligation, at what point she goes over to the husband's obligation. Says the Mishnah, La'ilam, forever, a woman who's engaged, she remains in the possession of her father, ad shatikanes lereshos habal, until she enters into her husband's possession, linesuin, with when she consummates her marriage. Let's say the father gave over her on the way to the chuppah, the father gives her over to the messengers of the husband, then she's considered part of the husband's possession. Let's say the father goes together with the messengers. Let's say the father sends messengers together with the husband's messengers. Then she remains in the father's possession. But once the messengers give her over to the husband, and with what relevance this is that she's considered in his possession or the husband's possession, we'll figure out in a moment. But first says the Gemara, my Lord, the wording of the Mishnah is funny. Look, forever she's of the father. What does that mean? Then the Mishnah says she's always until she goes to the husband. So what's the always? Explains the Gemara, Lafuki Mishnah Rishona, this is coming Lafuke, something which we learned at the very, very beginning of this Masechta 47 days ago. The Mishnah taught us that first Mishnah which had dictated the day of the marriage, the Wednesday night. Why? Because when this time comes for her to get married, she's allowed to eat from the husband's estate and she's allowed to eat Truma. So our Mishnah is teaching us no. She's not allowed to eat from Truma even after the wedding day comes until she's physically given over to the husband's possession. Continues the Gemara 8 lines down at the two dots. the one she's given over, she's in the husband's possession. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav, Misirasa Lakol. The giving over, the kala, giving over to the husband is for everything, except for Truma. Truma is never allowed to be eaten until she actually has the chuppah. When she's given over to the husband, she's fully considered part of the husband, she eats from his properties, etc. But with regard to Truma, if let's say she's the Yisrael and the husband's a Kayin, that she does not eat unless she has actual chuppah. Ravasi Amar, but says Ravasi, no, Amar, Afle Truma, even for Truma, she's considered in the husband's possession and she's going to get Truma visa Kayin. Eisvei, asked the Gemara in Ravasi, Ravuna the Ravasi, you Ravasi said she gets Truma before chuppah. V'ami the Rav Chia bar Rav the Ravasi, lo'ilam yibshas ahavet sheganas l'chuppah. It says you're in the possession of the father until she goes to chuppah, seemingly honing in on this detail that she does not. Amrlu Rav explained to Rav, Lav amina l'chud, did I not tell you, lo tez lo basar ibcha, don't go after something which is opposite, use your brain. Shanuyay, you could explain, giving over the woman to the agents of the husband, that itself, chuppah is being given over to the other party. So giving over to the agent of the husband, that is a form of chuppah, and that is going to be the reason why she will, yes, eat truma. Ushmuel Amar, that was opinion number one of Ravasi. Shmuel Amar liyushasa. Says Shmuel, what does it mean that she's considered part of her husband's rishus right now with regard to inheritance? Says the Gemara, Ksubasa, what do you mean with regard to Ksuba? The Mesa, that if she dies, Yaris law, that the husband, who's the new husband, will inherit her. Says the Gemara, Hainu de Shmuel. So that's the same thing of Shmuel that he said for Yerusha. So what's the difference in Yerusha inheritance and Ksuba? Amar Ravina loimer Ksuba me'achar mana. It's referred to the Ksuba is that the next time she'll get married, she's considered an almana. She's considered that she already was married, and then she will only get a 100 mana Ksuba like an almana. Continues the Gemara of Yechanan v'Rav Chanina dami tevarim zirasa la'akol. Giving over of the woman from the father's agents to the husband's is considered effective entirely. Af le'tshuma, even with regard to tshuma. Meisvei, ask the Gemara. Or there's a courtyard on the road, and she enters in with him to lodge in this inn. Even though the ksuba is from the husband, Mesa Aviv, if the father dies, Yarsha, he inherits her. Only after explains explicitly, only after you give her over, then the husband is going to inherit her. The Brisa said, what does it help giving over the woman from his agents to the husband's agents? The Brisa said explicitly, it's only for the Yerushasa. Avol Chuma, but with regard to Chuma, Ein Isha Chalez Be Chuma Shetiganes L'Chopa. The Brisa that there's no meaning of Chuma. We just had different opinions that giving over is a form of chuppah. We just said that even for Chuma. But says the Gemara, we see clearly that it has to be a real chuppah in order to eat Chuma. Tiyofta Tekulu Tiyofta. Says the Gemara, that is indeed a good question, that you only get the Chuma once there's a real chuppah. Now, we're going to conclude today's shir dissecting this final brisa for a moment. Ha gufa kasha. Says the Gemara, the brisa itself is contradictory. We said if he enters with her if he enters with the husband to lodge, taima delalin, but if not for the fact they went to go to sleep, then if they just went in for no reason, then we assume it's a form of nisuin. Ema Seifa, what did the end of the Brisa say? So they have to enter for Nisuin, Astam Alalin. So the Brisa can't be read. What does it mean that they enter together into this inn? Sounds like is there a necessity for inherent intent why they're going in for Nisuin or not? Amar Rav Ashi, Istami Katani. Says Rav Ashi, both are cases of Stam. Both are cases that they enter in without any specific intention. Stam Chatzar Dida Lol. The Stam Chatzar when it's her courtyard. What's the reason? Is to go to sleep overnight. So Stam Chatzar Dida, but if it is Chatzar, then the Stam intention is L'Nesuin. So the whole question was that usually you can have two stams, you can have two different contradictory reasons why you're doing something, but if it's one's hers courtyard and one's hers, then it makes a lot of sense. Says the Gemara, the father gave it over to the agents of the husband, the zinsa, and let's say now she is mizana, so what is her status? Is she considered a full-fledged married woman that was mizana or not? Harei zu bechanek. The halacha is she's considered like an Isha's ish once she's given over to the husband's agents, and therefore if she's mizana, she gets strangulation like an Isha's ish. Menon, immediately, where do we know this? Amar Ravami, Amar Chama, Amar Karl is noise beis aviyah. The pasuk says to commit adultery in her father's house. Prat and from here we exclude that once it's given over, then she has the status of a married woman, and then she will get chanek, strangulation. Ask the Gemara, maybe it comes to exclude someone that was entered into actual chuppah, but was not actually bald yet. No, if they actually had a chuppah, that's explicit. Yeah, Naira the pasuk says when there should be a Naira who's married to a man, Naira we darshin. So from here we see clearly that it comes to include a woman that's married without having actual relations, and therefore it must be that once she's given over to the agents, that's a form of chuppah, and then if she's unfortunately mizaneh, she's going to get strangulation like a married woman. And my nisua we conclude we see clearly in the Brisa, and therefore it must be that when the pasuk says bebeis aviyah, it excludes that even if she just was given over to the shluchim of the Baal, the husband's agents, even if she didn't have an actual chuppah, she has the status of a married woman, the status of a married woman with regard to the fact that if she is mezaneh, she will unfortunately have to get chanek, she'll get strangulation like an Eishes Ish, like a married woman. I'll pick it up from the top of Mem Tes Amud Aleph Mir Hashem tomorrow's Shir, which the Gemara begins with a new question.